You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course to the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Hello there, I'm Mike.
I'm Chaya.
And welcome to Spark Launch. We do not have a guest today, it's just Chaya and I talking to you. And we're going to talk a little bit about some more personal topics for today's episode. We don't exactly know all of where we're going with this episode, but do know a couple things that are going to get brought up. So I do want to throw up a few trigger warnings for those who are uncomfortable with that. And I'll also, hopefully, I will remember during the actual show note creation of this. So please, future Mike, remember this. I will attempt to put any timestamps of certain topics being discussed in the show notes if you would like to still listen to the episode, but avoid certain bits and bobs. Suicidality will be discussed, possibly some self-harm topics. I'll put any additional things that pop up, of course, in the show notes so you know ahead of time. But that little bit of housekeeping aside, I know you've been wanting to kind of talk about this with me a little bit for a while. So we've been kind of about to do this episode, I think since like season 1. So might as well do it now in season 3.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do it, but it's such a tough subject and I'm sensitive about it, not just for you and me, but also for the audience. And I believe everything has the right time. And I believe it right now is the right time because we're doing it. I'm so intrigued because very rarely you can get to speak to someone who's tried to commit suicide. If you're not a therapist or if you're not in the medical professional field, just for someone like me, I've never done that. I've never actually spoken to someone why they want to remove themselves from this planet. Why? And so, Mike, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm sure we'll all learn. And thank you for your vulnerability in advance. I know you've always spoken about your truth. But for me, just a little bit of background. When I heard someone in our neighborhood who committed suicide, it came to my attention randomly on Facebook. I didn't even know the mother of this person. And this was right before I started Spark Launch. I was questioning myself, still in the planning phase, and I wanted confirmation from the world. And so when that showed up on my feed in Facebook, I simply had to speak to the mother. And I reached out and I just wanted to know if that child had ADHD, because I was like, why else would that piece of information just show up on my feed? And so I connected with the mother and I met with her. She came home and she talked to me for 2 hours. And within the first 5 minutes, I asked her, did her son have ADHD? And she said, yes, he was diagnosed in 1st grade. And so all my doubts just disappeared for starting Spark Launch and my mission became clearer, but that was something that I had to hear. So I know it's real. It's those thoughts and incidents happen. So thank you for whatever you're going to share in advance.
Yeah, I try to make my experience as useful as possible. It helps me to feel like it has a point. I like to think any experience has some sort of usefulness you can pull from in some way. That's how I tend to look at my past suicide ideation and my past attempts as things I'm able to talk about, and I'm able to access those fairly plainly. I think also I'm able to access those in a very plain, almost non-emotional way because I'm autistic. I've thought about this for a while, that when it comes to autistic people, there's always this surprise when we're able to talk about really difficult topics in regards to our personal lives without getting upset, even when it upsets other people and they get confused. I've run into that a couple of times, both in my personal life and talking to other autistic individuals. And I think it's just a fact that our brains are able to access the memories but not the emotional component attached to them, because our brains kind of have those as two separate components in any experience we go through. Emotional baggage, it gets in its own subgroup. Like, I can access that and think about it, but it doesn't come with just thinking about the meat and potatoes of what led me there or the particular details about it or anything else. I can talk about it very plainly.
That is amazing. That's a gift that you're able to compartment. Yeah. That you're able to compartmentalize it and you can access it without letting you affect your day.
It's weird. It's very weird, honestly.
That tells me you've healed.
Yeah.
That tells me you're in a good place. And I think it's possible for people to get there once they work through those challenges and accept who they are. So I remember you saying 6 times you've tried committing suicide. And that really broke my heart, I have to say, because I had heard of all these incidents, theories, and then that mother. But then when I met you and we decided to do this podcast together and you shared that, it really just shocked me. So tell me about the first time that you thought of self-harm, and to what extent did you go? And was it sudden? Is that something that you were thinking about? How did that happen? You're here. Obviously, you're here. So if you can walk through that and let us know.
Spoilers, none of them worked. Nobody noticed from me talking. Honestly, the one that was the most sudden was probably the last one. The first one, not so much. All my attempts were secretive. Like, no one even knew that I did them. I didn't get far enough into the attempts for there to be need for medical intervention, but it was not passively suicidal. There's a difference between passively and actively suicidal. I have been in both fields of that numerous times in my life. For my first time, memories of some of those early ones are a little fuzzy because of how early on in my life they were. I was super young. My thoughts of suicide started probably around the age of, I'm guessing the age of 10. It could be earlier. I'm not really sure. I remember some vague stuff of clearly looking back, there were depressive thoughts predating that. I go with 10 because I think that's where my first active sit down and I'm going to actually attempt suicide moment kind of happened. That was, I have a couple different methods, which I only talk about kind of vaguely here for the most part. That was a more wrist-based scenario for me. Most of the early ones were, because that seemed to be the one I had the easiest access to. So I have a lot of memories of sitting in the bathroom on the either edge of the tub or just sitting on the toilet and holding something sharp to my wrists and fighting the urge to do it for the most part, trying. And I really only ever, I think, actually cut myself once, but it didn't get, I was able to stop before I got to the vein. So it wasn't anything that, once again, needed medical intervention or anything. Other things were, I did not, like a little later on, especially as I got into my teenage years, I would go to the medicine cabinets and start pulling out things to create a cocktail for me to take. I was able to find ways to stop those moments. And that was throughout my young age to my teenage years. I don't remember the exact ages of most of them. I only remember the last one by year because it was so recent. And that was 2018, I want to say. And that was the one that was the most sudden. The other ones always had lead up, even from a young age, because I was just very depressed and I hated existence, myself and my own thoughts. And there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But for my last, that was something, a family member. I was in a very high stress situation in my life between a couple different things. Plus that was pretty much the beginning of my eating disorder. It was around that time. So I was very activated and I thought I had been past depression and suicidal ideation. I made the mistake of thinking I was past it. And I was triggered by a family member who emotionally hurt me. And I walked into my bedroom. I opened up a drawer that I had been given a handgun just for protection while the house was empty, like a couple weeks prior, and it was just still in my drawer. I'm not really a gun person. I took it out. I put it in my mouth. I cocked it and was about half a second away from just pulling the trigger until I realized I had done all of that action without thinking. And that startled me out of, because it was just so viscerally weird, honestly. Like, it was just like I went from 0 to 100 in less than 30 seconds. And so I pulled it out of my mouth and I was just like, what the hell just happened? Like, I did all of that, like, robotically, like on complete autopilot. Like, it was so sudden. It was so impulsive. And that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I had pretty much just started therapy not that long before. And then we talked about that a lot. And that was the last time I ever tried or had the inclination. I've been depressed since then. Things have really hurt me since then, but it has not come up. I'm not saying I've never had the whisper. I think the whisper still stays with you in one way. And if you completely ignore it, it can get louder. But for the most part, I just tell it to go away. Like, it comes up in bad moments because it's something my brain knows that I can go to when things get overwhelming or hard. And overwhelm happens a lot as an autistic person, as an ADHD person. My brain will kind of automatically go, you know what the easy way out of this is? And I accept that's just what my brain accesses immediately just because of my past. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm even passively suicidal. It's just a thought the first thought that I have, but it's not my second, which is, I think, very important. Like, I am not responsible sometimes for my first thought, but I'm responsible for my second. And that immediately leaves my brain. That's been pretty much my earliest memories are of being suicidal and self-harm. I never cut myself or anything like that, except for that one instant, but that's not how I self-harmed. I would pull my hair out. I'd dig my nails in to myself. I can't remember if I did this multiple times. Hit myself with a belt. Mostly, though, my go-to was hitting my head really hard or punching myself. Also a common autistic thing when dealing with overwhelm. Some autistics have like a stim of hitting yourself. I definitely have that too. I have it in 2 stages. Like, I think I started doing that because of autistic overwhelm looking back. And I found that was also a good go-to for self-harm. So I still have the urge to hit myself, not out of self-harm, but as a stim when I'm feeling overwhelmed. These days, I do the trick of I just kind of lightly tap my head. It gets the action. So I still kind of get whatever regulating need is necessary out of it, but I don't actually actively hit myself, which helps a lot. So there's no damage. But I can also tell the difference for when I get the urge to actively hurt myself for self-harm reasons. And that I don't give any quarter to. Like, I don't meet that particular urge halfway or anything. I just cope in much better ways. I distract myself and I am kind to myself in those moments instead of going to that. Like, not hating myself for wanting to self-harm kind of goes a long way. But yeah, so those are the darker parts of my story, I suppose you could say. Things that a lot of people don't know about. Very few people in my life have known about that for the most part. I'll talk openly about it when I'm doing support groups or anything, but never even really gone into that much detail.
A lot of things that came to my mind. First of all, I was just thinking about the last attempt and how you went from 0 to 100 within 30 seconds. And then you had the access of the gun, and that the access to the gun actually made you get so close to actually doing it. And that's why I don't want to get political, but I feel that's one of the reasons why we don't want to have access to guns, because it's not a calculated move. It's just emotions. I'm glad in that split second something dropped into your head and you questioned. And I'm grateful for that you questioned and you even almost looked at yourself from the outside and you're like, Mike, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And So I'm grateful for that question, that thought that came after. But what are the lessons you have learned to protect yourself, even including the family member who triggered you? What actions have you taken to protect Mike?
It's a cliche, but it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And really, you can see all problems as being temporary when the fact that we all will die naturally at some point. I think I have an odd relationship to death, I think, because of my attempts. And I'm speaking, of course, for myself. Most suicidal people, while we all have very dark humor and we can joke about our suicide attempts, no one will tell a suicide joke that's funnier than someone who has attempted suicide. I would just like to state that. Most don't have the weirdly comforting relationship with death that I have. I'm a spooky person and I like the macabre and blah, blah, blah. But also I think of memento mori, remember you will die. And I actually think in positive terms when it comes to death. I may have talked about this on the show previously, and I probably have. I talk about it a lot. There's a Japanese principle called mono no owari that is more or less about the transience of everything. Most people, if you look up mono no owari, it'll talk about cherry blossoms as like the main analogy for it. Of cherry blossoms are very beautiful. They also only bloom for a very short amount of time once a year. You look at them and you take in their beauty, but you also do it by acknowledging the fact that they will die. Like, it will fall, it will wither and shrink up again. I think about that in regards to everything, even bad times, even really horrible, depressed emotions. They wither and die. Good emotions, bad emotions, everything is temporary. Now, that doesn't make situations I find myself in or anybody finds themselves in not worth being depressed over. And some do continue over and over again, particularly if you're dealing with people who are being abused. That is something that they don't really have control over, and they don't get to necessarily say that this is going to end and go away. But in the grand scheme of our lives, we live for a very short amount of time when it comes to a big floating rock in space. Our lives are not that long. Even if we live to over 100, our lives are still not long in the grand scheme of what time is. And for that, any pain that I have will eventually not have meaning. So I'd rather just prescribe meaning to the things I want to prescribe meaning to. Another big takeaway I've always had, and I didn't know what depression was until I was a teenager, what it actually was. So I didn't know what was wrong with me when I was a kid, which made me hate myself more because I just thought I was broken. And I really thought I was broken until I was like, in my late 20s. I think a lot of people do when it comes to depression is they look forward to the things that they do love that are coming up and create little milestones of whatever, even if it's just like a book you like that's coming out. And I would do that as a kid. Like, well, if I do this, then I won't get to see this or read this because I liked art and media as a kid. Art and media is actually really important to me to this day. It's like, I love film, I love comics, I love literature. There's so much that I would find reasons to live to be able to experience. And that's really taught me like those experiences matter. Like the experience of intaking something like that matters. And that would occasionally literally make me take something off of my wrist at the last minute, because that's kind of the bargain I would make to myself. Like, I should at least wait till after this. And thankfully, most of the time, when after that thing would happen, my need at that particular moment would have passed, because those feelings live and die. The immediate feeling of release from whatever that is that we need from the piercing sadness and despair that we find ourselves in, that dies too. That is not a emotion that will sustain itself. You can pull out of it. And I made the mistake of never going to community or anything. I never told anybody until later in life. Never told my family until I was like 30. And no one should ever hold that in and keep it private, because it's nothing to be ashamed of also. And I think being open about that is what made 2018 the last time I have ever tried that and will ever try that. I'm just kinder to myself in those moments. I'm still going to get depressed on things. There's a lot that I do for myself. I have a mental toolbox and I have medication I take every day. And that's been a big help because there are some things I don't have control over. Like I don't have control over chemical imbalances in my brain. I can't outthink that, but I can get a helping hand with them. And that has helped me pull myself out of a pit. That attempt was kind of my rock bottom, my first rock bottom. It turns out I did have like something, I did dig deeper somehow, but that was more in regards to my eating disorder, which I was kind of using as a coping mechanism for a couple of years. And then that's when I really hit rock bottom and needed to bounce back out. But I needed to get serious about helping myself. I needed to get serious about using the information and feelings that I had put towards other people for so long, because in the midst of all of this, I had helped friends and people I had met sometimes when they're literally on the edge and about to jump off, and I've pulled them back by just talking to them because I knew how to talk to them in a way that was actually helpful versus how a lot of people talk to suicidal people, which tends not to be particularly helpful, even if you mean good. But I've talked to people about that, but I never applied it to myself. And I knew I needed to finally use that and gain more knowledge and actually utilize some of these practices, some of these things to just give myself self-worth again and keep up on my mental health and heal myself a little bit, and also forgive myself for attempting. Not that there was even anything that I should feel like I need to forgive, because no, I acted in a way that made sense to me at the time. There's not really anything to forgive, but I did feel a lot of self-shame and guilt for having attempted, and I needed to let go of that a lot. And I needed to also acknowledge that I was going to always struggle with depression one way or another. Like that was a part of my life. I was never going to get too smart for depression. I was never going to find a way out of depression. I needed to be aware of my thought patterns. I also needed to not think them so precious. They are balloons, that can pop. There's nothing particularly important about my thoughts. My thoughts are not any more important to hold on to as anybody else, that I wouldn't want to hold on to dark thoughts. And for that, I had to start seeing myself as kind of part of the human race, and we're all sort of united in misery, particularly those who struggle with depression and suicidal ideation. I say united in misery a lot, because even if we've never met and we don't entirely line up for why we're depressed, at the end of the day, we've still been into the same pit, the same shroud of dark, the same storm cloud. Like, it all kind of ends up looking the same shape-wise. And I find a lot of comfort in that. I find comfort in knowing that I have met and can continue to meet people, as sad as it is to have people be going through that or have gone through that. It makes everything seem less big and terrifying. Depression can come across as very profound. It can come across as almost biblical in how unrelenting it is. Like, it is weight holding you down. I have early memories of being a little kid and I'm just curled up in a ball and I don't even know why, just sitting in the dark or just staring up at my ceiling fan in the middle of the night because I had the insomnia brand of depression and I could never sleep. It is unrelenting. It does not stop whenever you're in it, and it can feel like there's only one way to stop it. And once again, this is kind of a cliche that you see shared a lot of the suicidal thing of, it's not that you want your life to end, it's that you want your life as you know it to end. And there is kind of a difference. No one wants truly to be miserable and hate themselves and die like that. There needs to be an understanding that the person who's going through that is stuck in a meat suit that they feel like they didn't ask for. I wrote a series of short stories years ago, just some short horror stories that I still am actually fairly proud of. It's a vampire story, and the character gets turned into a vampire kind of against his will from people who want to save his life. And every malevolent action he takes from that point forward throughout history is out of anger from being robbed of death. I look back now, it's like, oh yeah, I was working stuff out. I was working a lot of stuff out. I would write depression and suicide into almost everything, even in ways that I didn't quite know what I was doing. But that summed up how I felt. And I think a lot of people feel, which is just, this is life unwanted. Like, I don't want to be here. I didn't ask for this, because everything just feels like it's not on fire, but it's rotting. And that can get frustrating for other people.
I have to ask, has any of that to do with realizing that you were different from the people around you? And that fact that you were different, as a child, you didn't know, you probably couldn't define what different was, but you couldn't identify with people around you. Just that aspect of it maybe made you feel sad and didn't feel you fit in because you didn't think like the people around you?
I always felt out of frequency. That's what I've always called it. I was in a different frequency than everybody else. Now looking back, I'm AuDHD. Of course, I'm out of frequency with everybody else around me. And I was othered a lot, particularly by my extended family. They othered me a lot. And I didn't feel like I fit in with them. I didn't feel like I fit in with anybody. I was just awkward and different. And also, when you're depressed, you kind of other yourself. Taking neurodivergency out of it, you who's depressed will feel othered and internalize a lot of hatred because of it. Throw in neurodivergency, and it's just a feedback loop where you just feel like an alien. There's very little in yourself you can find. And it's not like I didn't have friends. Like, I did occasionally meet friends, and that helped me a lot because I stopped being so isolated. And I was able to share likes and dislikes with other people, other kids. And that would help me understand that there were parts of me that I enjoyed, particularly when it came to media, that, other people like those things too. And, once again, that's me kind of like finding art and seeing like, okay, that can bring people together. When I was a kid, I didn't get along with other kids, which is a very common autistic experience. I got along with adults, but then adults didn't want to have anything to do with me because I'm a small child. And then, of course, as you get older, I still liked kids' stuff whenever I was a teenager. So other teenagers don't really want to hang out with you, at least the right ones. So I didn't have any friends or anything. And I tried really hard to shed childlike things from my life. Like, I threw out things I so much regret throwing out that I would love to have back. And there was a period when I was like 14 where I just refused to allow myself to watch cartoons, like in any way, shape, or form, because I still liked watching random cartoons, mostly old stuff. And it's wild. Like, I went like probably nearly 10 years without watching anything animated just because of the stigma on that and not wanting to seem childish. Like, I was obsessed with not seeming childish, which is what I was obsessed with when I was a kid, because I thought if I didn't seem childish, other people would accept me more. But nobody accepted me anyway, so it didn't really matter.
It didn't work. It didn't never work. That's the masking. That's the extent of masking people go to, punishing themselves to become somebody else, to fit in, to be like, to be connected, because we are all here to connect with each other. I think being accepted by another it's in our DNA, it's in our soul, because we are all here to connect, because we can't accomplish what we've come here to do by ourselves. We have to connect. So that need for connection to be understood is there in everybody. But when you have a world that is built for neurotypical, and when you bring a neurodivergent child into the picture who cannot express, doesn't have the words, the vocabulary, the sentences to put together at that age, will naturally feel a misfit. And you were able to connect through art. And back then, when you didn't have social media, you didn't have means of finding your own kind, it is very challenging, especially the environment you're in is very different from who you are. You're vibrating a different frequency, and it's all frequency. I know it's all frequency. And the way we connect to one another is through frequency. And there's a number to it. When there is that mismatch, you don't connect. You just don't connect. So for a child, I can only picture how challenging it is. Even today, by the time they can actually put everything together, they have to be a little more grown up. But they still feel that. They still have all those feelings without being able to express. So if any parent is listening, if you have a child who somehow you get a clue, an inkling as to they might be struggling, they're lonely, or something is off, because I think we all have intuition. We can feel it. I would say just empathize, connect with them, understand them, and just talk to them and make them feel that they are wanted genuinely, because being neurodivergent can tell if it's fake.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that fake talk won't work. We know that. I could call out even when I was a child or even at work, can tell when something is fake, something is off. I just know. But so genuinely, and to be genuine, you should really open up your mind to the fact that, yeah, your child could be very different from yourself, right? Just because they are a product that comes through us does not mean that they have to be an exact replica of us, or like, yes, they should get our genes and they should behave the same. They could be completely different. Just know that they are special and that they have something to offer. They might not have figured out then. It's not about the schools, the grades, but they're here for a purpose. And create a safe environment, especially with neurodivergent children. Just if you allow them not to fit into the system, I think that's big enough. And know that they're here for a purpose. Know that every soul, every single person is here to do something. And when we do that, we open up our minds and heart.
There's already one of you, and so there doesn't need to be a second one of you. And I think that's when it comes to wanting like your kids to be carbon copies of you, which can, and sometimes kids will choose to be, they'll just be naturally like that. And that's fine too. But wanting them to be, to the fact you're trying to make them like you, like the beauty of that is you're birthing a new being into the universe, literally birthing. And that being can be anything and anyone. It's completely their own personality. And that goes for like, no, there's already one of you, and that's great too. Like, you have things to offer. Purpose doesn't have to be this grand gesture. I don't have any particular grand gestures to whatever my purpose is. My purpose sometimes is figuring out what my purpose is. For me, it's some days my purpose is making sure my cat gets fed. That's really great for my cat. Like, she likes being alive and being fed. Other times I try to be service to other people. Some people, your purpose doesn't need to be that. Like, hell, someone who loves being a mechanic, their purpose is being a mechanic. If they feel like their purpose is being a mechanic and they're happy with that, that is exactly what their purpose is. Awesome. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I want to speak for a second. You're talking about speaking to someone who's suicidal and just trying to empathize with them and connect and understand them. That's really key there. I know it's daunting for people to particularly interact with a loved one who's suicidal, actively or passively. Let me give one very important piece of advice. Don't remind them of all the reasons they have to live, because you have ruined any chance of trying to connect with them at that point. Trust me, they are already kind of aware of all of that. By telling them they have all these things to live for, you are invalidating all the reasons they feel like none of that matters. So that's not a good place to start from. I hated when people did that to me. I still kind of do. I would much rather do that with myself, talking to myself. Like, well, I have this to live for. I want to do this. I want to do that. Help someone find what their reasons to live for in the moment. Don't tell them what they can and cannot do. That can sometimes really blow up in your face because they may very well just tell you what you want to hear until you go away. So that is a dangerous place to go down at that point. Instead, just be with them and remind them that you are there with them in that moment. And don't just try to do positive platitudes, or it does get better, but no one going through that honestly feels like it gets better in the exact moment it's happening. It's going to feel like it's going on forever. And you can acknowledge that while saying that it does get better at the same time. But don't ever skimp over that fact. Do recommend for like a really simple course you can take. You can find a lot of nonprofits that do it. Mental health first aid is a really good resource to start with. They have really good practices. If you know a lot about mental health, going through it is pretty boilerplate in a lot of ways. So it's like stuff you kind of already know, but they have a very particular way of going through it. If you are not familiar, honestly, it is really good training to have for lots of different situations, but particularly with suicidality. It's something I recommend. I'm a mental health first aid certified myself, but honestly, it's just a really good course to take. It's only a couple hours and you get a lot of information. There's a good book that comes with it. If you're just interested in making sure that you are prepared anytime you would come up against that. And honestly, it's also very affirming if you are someone who's had a lot of those thoughts going through training that can show you that there are people who care and are trying to do things to make life better for people such as yourself. That was actually a very nice experience to go through in that regard for me.
It's a good tip. And I think the last thing a person going through it wants to get advice from anybody. I've seen that in little emotional things that I've gone through. People advising from their point of view never works.
Exactly.
So I can imagine with suicide, if somebody's trying to say things that work for them, that won't work. And that's where real empathy is required, because you have to somehow just accept that you don't understand it at all fully and just give space, but be there. I think just connection will heal.
Advice doesn't get anybody too far. There's a phrase I like from a piece of media, and it's follow your ghost. Like, that's what I've named my coaching service, followyourghostcoach.com, if you want to learn more. But the reason I like it is it's kind of my personal philosophy of everyone already kind of knows what they need and knows how to get there for the most part. They just sometimes need a little bit of help. Like, that's that ghost that's inside of them that knows the advice that they need to hear. But hearing it from somebody else usually doesn't help, because that's not taking into account all of the emotions they're going through, all of their particular situations. And also, your advice might not be exactly what they need, but what they need is kind of locked up in a box somewhere deep inside. And I also kind of see peer support as also kind of a ghost. Like, for me, working in peer support, doing groups, doing coaching, even doing this podcast, honestly, I am a ghost of your experience. I am someone who has been in a version of your shoes, at least, or at least just know the dregs of mental health, all the dark places, all the frustrating places. And sometimes you just need like someone who is the ghost of your experience to be beside you while you are able to safely explore those parts of you and unlock the things that you need unlocked to find yourself and find what will work for you and what will make you better, or find motivation in helping you. That's why, honestly, peer support has been more valuable to me than any other modality. Like, just going to support groups and having a mentor for the time that I had a mentor, like, all that stuff has been insanely helpful for me, because that's what I needed. And that helped me find my own self-worth.
Yeah. I think that is the most important thing, is to find worth in yourself. And every single soul is looking externally, because that's how we are taught. And when you look at the educational systems, it's about finding your worth, right? If you get a good grade, you feel good and you feel you're learning and growing. But when it comes to neurodivergence, even though they might be getting good grades, they don't define their worth through that, right? Through external factors.
Yeah.
It's something from inside of them, because they are more deeply connected to their own soul. So finding your worth is the key. Helping someone who's struggling, help them find their own worth would really transform. If we have to extend any help to them, I think that to actually light them up, to not artificially light them up, because that doesn't work. External influence doesn't work. You have to ignite them from inside. Yeah, that will make a difference. Yes.
And you do it by making people feel safe. Everyone deserves to feel safe, even when they're not in very safe situations. Do what you can to make people feel safe. But I know this was a heavy episode, so I hope everyone's okay who decide to stick with us and listen. But I do appreciate Chaya letting me spew on this particular topic. I even have more to say than I expected to say. So I do thank Chaya for this. And I do thank the listeners for putting up with my diatribes on this and letting me tell my story as well.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for sharing with someone who didn't understand fully, and you just opened up your heart and your throat and shared your experiences. And I and our audiences are grateful for that.
So for those wanting to listen to more Spark Launch, they're all not particularly this heavy. Of course, you can visit sparklaunchpodcast.com. We're on all of your favorite podcast listening methods. If you just search Spark Launch, you will find our previous seasons, the current season, and our next season. You can also, of course, visit sparklaunch.org as well to learn more about that. And if you would like to talk to me or have a peer support session with me, I'm in a few different places. You can go to my website at followyourghostcoach.com or email me at mike@followyourghostcoach.com. I also recently actually started with Autism Personal Coach, which is a really great organization. I am on there now. If you go to their website, click on coaches and scroll down to me, you can find my calendar there and my bio, and you can go ahead and book a free 15 minutes consultation chat with me. Also, these days, I'm on Hey Peers, which is a very popular peer support platform. I do a lot of groups for DBSA, it's the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, through them. Also, I currently do a Hey Peers certified group that meets weekly that is ADHD support. So if you'd like to sign up for that, that is available. Plus, I'm also available for one-on-ones on there. And you can also just send me a chat, honestly. I got nothing else going on, except all the things I just named. So all those, of course, I'll go ahead and include in the show notes as well. Just my one little bit of self-promotion. But I want to thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.